I'm just gonna warn you, this video might upset you. I am planning on telling you the truth about certain things, meaning that I'm uncovering some of the BS that's out there about prepping and homesteading. And I feel like I could be an authority on this because I grew up working on a homestead when I was a kid. My parents' best friends had the largest private blueberry ranch in all of Washington. They had 8 kids. They lived on acreage. They grew their own food. They earned money bucking hay. Seemed like the life that everybody nowadays loves, but there's some major problems with it. I am passionate about sharing this truth because I'm the one going out to some of these homesteads and some of these prepper homes, and they're now looking to sell, and they're having to look at taking a loss. And we're not talking like 20 grand. We're talking like $50, $100, $150,000 loss because they didn't understand the risks that they were taking and the way they were setting this up. Now, if you're serious about doing a homestead or prepping, don't let this deter you. Just know the information so that you can gauge this properly and understand the risks that you're about to take. Welcome to another episode of Living Life in North Idaho. My name is Trent, and on this channel, we talk about what it's like living, eating, working, playing, and buying real estate here in Idaho. If that's of interest to you, make sure you tap the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, because every time I come out with a new video, that's what's gonna get you notified. If you don't hit that bell, it's not gonna notify you. So let's dive into this, why you do not want to be living off grid or on a homestead here in Idaho. Now, there's a certain channel I'm gonna pick on, and I don't mean to throw shade. I think they're great people. I love their channel. I think it's cool what they're doing, but there's something that they're not telling people, and it's a big deal. Because if you don't know this, you're gonna end up failing. The channel I'm talking about is Good Simple Living, right up here in Bonners Ferry. And again, there's no shade to them. I think it's awesome what they're doing, but they make a lot of money from that channel, and that's totally okay. I'm a born-again capitalist. You make money however you can in this country. They make a lot of money because they're getting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of views on their videos, which they get ad revenue from, and that's just a little bit. When you have 500,000 subscribers, there are brands and corporations that will do sponsorships and pay thousands, tens of thousands sometimes, to get in front of that audience. Again, I think it's wonderful. Good for them. I hope to be able to do that someday too. But if you're not telling people that, hey, this is how we're funding this thing, and you're encouraging people to try to live that lifestyle too, that's a factor that is very important, because the calls that I get are from people who, hey, I sold my house, I have this much money, I need to find land, I'm gonna build the house myself, and this is gonna be much less expensive of a way to live than living in town. I'm telling you right now, it's not. It is not way less expensive to live that way. That's why they're able to do it so successfully, is because that channel is funneling a bunch of money into their operation. Again, amazing. I just want people to know that if you don't have money coming in, if you're not monetizing this activity, then it's costing you money. Anytime you try to save money, but by saving money means that you can't work as much or invest into your income, you're actually losing money. Show me the money! And that's something that people don't seem to understand when they're looking to do this. And I want people to know so that they don't end up in a place where they're like, I ran out of money. Anytime you run out of money trying to do something like this, you're gonna take a loss when it comes to selling it, almost guaranteed. Everybody who calls us to go, hey, can you list my off-grid property, or can you list my homestead? It's almost always a loss compared to what they bought and invested into it, because people don't wanna buy half-finished projects. The other really big factor you need to consider is this is a complete lifestyle change. Not a bad thing if your lifestyle has kind of sucked living in the city. But when you pivot too far over because it seems exciting, you're gonna miss the nuances. The other thing is that the cost is always going to be there no matter what. You have to maintain that house. Things do not last forever. Even metal roofs, They last a long time, but they can get damaged and they can rust out, and you will eventually have to replace them. The other thing that doesn't get talked about much is the lost opportunity cost. When you are investing all of your time and money into a homestead or off-grid property, there are opportunities you're missing out on, whether it's learning a new skill, building a new business, making new connections. There's all these opportunities that you're not going to have because you're out there working on your homestead for when the world comes to an end. Now, it's important to remember there's giant events that happen in history, but the world has yet to end. I'm pretty sure that the Jews in Germany during World War II might have thought this is the end of the world. No, even Germany came back after all of that and is now a prosperous, thriving country. Same as Japan. So even though America might be going through some really gnarly stuff and giant shifts and things are going to get shaken up, this idea that everything's going to fall apart and stay that way is just not realistic. I mean, who knows? Maybe it's the end times.
The world will end next week! Spend your children's college fund! Thaw that turkey now!
But again, I'm pretty sure Jews back in the World War II era were probably thinking the same thing, and it wasn't. No one knows when that's happening. There's a book that talks about that. No one knows. The other important factor to consider is it's not easy, and it doesn't get much easier. You are going to need to learn new skills, learn how to maintain that property, and you're going to need to maintain it consistently. I grew up with best friends that were on a homestead out in Washington, and they were growing their own food, and they were trying to live as cheaply as possible. It didn't work out well. There was a lot of stress. There was a lot of frustration. Kids ended up growing up feeling like, gosh, there's some good moments, but we were really just a workforce to keep that place going. And so these are really important factors to consider. It doesn't get much easier. And so even though it seems awesome when you get started, nothing that requires consistent maintenance like that is that much fun long term. Remember too that there's a psychological component to living that way. It's not an uplifting way to live most of the time. Now I think homesteading, there's definitely some positivities to that. And there is purpose when you go, I'm gonna give my kids raw, natural food and not have all of the crap that they put in our food, all the poisons and toxins that are creating the diseases we're seeing today. That can be really powerful, but at the end of the day, when you raise your kids like this, there have been studies. Kids that are raised with a prepper mentality or with that mindset of like the world is not safe, things are going bad, they end up having some psychological issues, and when they need to get out into the real world, they have to overcome those. So it's just another burden that gets placed on children. Now, not everybody is going to do that, right? Some people are going to stay positive, they're going to have positive mindsets, but it's pretty difficult to do when the reason you're doing this is you think everything's going to pot. You got to protect your kids from negativity and from that fear-based thinking. Even though that might be your motivation, if you do decide to do that, consider that your kid, it might not happen in your lifetime or even in your kid's lifetime. And so you need to prepare them to be able to go back into society and be successful. And you gotta know that when you live that lifestyle, your friend group is going to change. People who like to just have conveniences and comfort, they'll come out and check out your spot, but ultimately they're gonna be inviting you to come out and hang out with them, because going out and hanging out in a house that maybe doesn't have consistent electricity or cable or internet or whatever it is, the creature comforts that people love, they're eventually gonna go, I don't like this mindset. I just wanna live my life. You're gonna be surrounded by people with similar mindset, which isn't always a negative thing. But again, when you don't have that outside perspective, you create an echo chamber, and pretty soon you're gonna be losing touch with reality. This is a thing. They have done studies on this. There has been documentaries on this. This stuff happens, and if you're not aware of this, you too can fall for it. Again, it's impossible to time the Armageddon. I think there's been probably 4 or 5 times in my life that I'm like, oh, this is probably it. And it's not. And even though things are getting very weird, we're definitely going through a shift, you have to step back and go, okay, is this really Armageddon, or is this kind of similar to the shift that happened during the Industrial Revolution to where we started changing things to technology? I mean, we're always going through these shifts, and there are massive upsets when this happens. And unfortunately, when you have poor leadership in government, it often gets very, very messy and sometimes a little violent. But I do come with a solution. I'm not just here to poo-poo homesteads or living off-grid, and this is based on a lot of years of experience and observation. Remember, my parents were in a very similar mindset, and so were their best friends, and I grew up seeing how this works. So there is a way to plan for this, to prepare for bad things to happen without it completely throwing off your entire life. First thing you want to do, get to a place with lots of resources. You want a place that have forests with animals. You want natural water, and especially if it has fish in those waters, that's a big deal too. Don't live in a super dense populated area, and make sure you make friends with people that have good skill sets that are valuable in the event that things do go to pot. So living next to a national forest is a pretty dang good idea. And here in North Idaho, lots of public land, national forests, as well as sources of water, lakes, rivers with lots of fish. And you want to create strong relationships with local co-ops, farmers, ranchers, people that know how to produce food and have skill sets and grit to deal with things when they get hard. And make your on-grid home capable of being off-grid while still operating and running without requiring a ton of maintenance. That is ultimately the best solution, because when you do that properly, that brings up your home's value because people can move into it and it's just a backup option that they don't have to add and not something that they absolutely have to rely on and put a bunch of money and maintenance to keep it running. Ultimately, you do not want to be too far away from society. And here's why. This is kind of going against the homesteader and prepper mindset, but hear me out. You are going to need medical treatment at some point in time. You are going to need people with certain skill sets to fix things that you might not know how. And when you go out and isolate yourself and you cut off those connections and relationships because you're just gonna lone wolf it and do your own thing, you're gonna have a really hard time, especially in the event that bad things are happening. Consider the fact too that when things do hit the fan, your stress level is going to go through the roof. It's just human nature. When you're stressed, you don't sleep as well. When you don't sleep as well, you get sloppy, you make mistakes, you don't think things through, and that's oftentimes when you get hurt. It's also important to remember that there's really no such thing as being fully off-grid. We live in a time where we have satellites and drones. There is no property out there, unless it's a cave, that is not going to be found by people outside.
Anybody home?
And in my opinion, if things really go bad and you're just out there doing your own thing, you've kind of made yourself a target for people who have bad intentions. At least if you're in society, you can form together, you can create defenses, you can have guards, you can create a small society to help keep things running. This idea that everything falls apart and everybody turns on each other, that just doesn't really happen. I don't really know of too many examples where that took place. And if none of this has deterred you, at least consider this. Buy a piece of property, put a camper on it, go camp on it, go have fun, and start building it out over time. Don't just invest everything into doing this, because you're gonna get the timing wrong, you're gonna run out of money, or psychologically, you're gonna mess yourself up and you're not gonna be able to return to society even when things get better. So just consider that. Buying land, having a camper, having it set up is something that is absolutely transferable for an exchange of value. Going out and building your own thing, having all these half unfinished projects, they're not gonna work out in your favor when it comes time to try to cash out, if you ever do. I know this probably made quite a few people mad, and I'm okay with it because I really do feel this is an important truth to share. And again, I'm not trying to throw shade on Good Simple Living. Love their channel, love what they're doing. Just know they are making a lot of money because you're watching this and you might even be buying the products that they are promoting. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. If you are serious about getting moved to Idaho, reach out at the phone number or email address listed below. Day, nights, weekends, it does not matter. And make sure you check out the other videos in my channel. Lots of good information about what it's like living in Idaho. Until the next one, I will see you later.